The summer sun filtered through the trees that lined my neighborhood street, throwing streaks of golden light across the pavement. I walked slowly, deliberately, with Max at my side. Max wasn't just any dog. He was my service dog. A strong, gentle German shepherd, trained to help me with the anxiety and PTSD that had shadowed my life since my years in the military. His presence grounded me. His watchful eyes reminded me that no matter how unpredictable the world was, I wasn't alone in it. Most neighbors knew Max and treated him with respect. Kids loved to wave as he padded along beside me, and he was always calm, never aggressive. But there was one exception in this otherwise peaceful neighborhood, Karen. She lived 3 houses down, and from the first day I moved in, she had decided I was her personal enemy. To her, everything I did was against the HOA rules. My lawn was too tall. My truck was parked incorrectly. Even the American flag I flew proudly outside my porch had been too large. She had filed multiple complaints against me, all of which had been dismissed by the HOA board. But Karen wasn't the type to give up. Over the weeks, she began to direct her anger at Max. "That dog doesn't belong here," she sneered once, catching me as I came back from a walk. "He looks dangerous. He scares my children." I calmly explained again that Max was a federally protected service animal. I even showed her the paperwork, hoping to end the conversation. Instead, she folded her arms, scoffed, and muttered something about people faking disabilities just to keep big dogs. Her words stung more than I cared to admit. Max wasn't just a dog, he was my lifeline. Without him, panic attacks would have consumed me. But I tried to brush it off to avoid giving Karen more fuel. That restraint didn't last. It was a Saturday afternoon when everything came to a breaking point. I had just returned from the grocery store and was unloading bags from my truck. Max sat by my side, alert but calm, watching as I carried the bags up the steps. That's when Karen stormed out of her house, her phone in one hand and something small and metallic in the other. She shouted across the yard, "I told you that beast is dangerous. I've had enough of you breaking HOA rules." Before I could even process what was happening, she raised her hand and sprayed Max with pepper spray. Time slowed in that instant. Max yelped, a sound I'd never heard from him before. His body jerked back, pouring at his face, his eyes blinking rapidly as the burning liquid clung to his fur. The pain in his cry cut through me like a knife. I dropped the grocery bag in, my cans rolling down the steps, and rushed to Max's side. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I roared, my hands trembling as I tried to soothe him, wiping his face with my shirt. My heart raced as I watched my loyal companion writhing. In agony, Karen, standing smugly with the pepper spray still clutched in her hand, didn't look sorry. She looked triumphant. "I told you he was a threat," she shrieked. "Now the HOA will finally listen to me." I stared at her, my entire body trembling with rage. "He's my service dog," I said, my voice breaking. "You just attacked a service animal. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Her smirk faltered for only a moment before she straightened again, phone raised as if it were a weapon. "I'm calling the HOA president right now. They'll fine you, and maybe they'll even take that dog away. Animals like that don't belong here." My hands shook as I helped Max inside. He whimpered softly, his eyes red and watery. I knelt beside him, tears spilling down my face. The years I had spent training with him, relying on him, trusting him. Karen had assaulted that bond in seconds. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a violation of something sacred. I rinsed Max's face carefully, whispering reassurances, even though I wasn't sure he could hear me over his own pain. His breathing steadied slightly, but his whimpers carved into my chest with every sound. In that moment, rage warred with despair. This wasn't just a petty HOA complaint anymore. Karen had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She hadn't just attacked Max, she had attacked me. My phone buzzed with a call from a fellow veteran buddy. My voice shook as I explained what had happened. There was a long pause before he said firmly, "Call the cops right now. She just committed a federal crime." The words hung in the air. Federal crime. It hadn't even fully registered in my adrenaline-fueled anger. Service dogs weren't pets. They were protected under federal law. What Karen had done wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. As I dialed 911, my hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The operator's calm voice steadied me as I explained the situation. My service dog was just attacked by my neighbor with pepper spray. He's in pain. Please, send someone quickly. Within minutes, I heard sirens wailing down the street. Red and blue lights bathed Karen's house as 2 squad cars pulled up. Karen stood on her porch, arms crossed, looking annoyed rather than worried, as if the cops were there to support her. When the officers approached, she launched into her usual tirade. "Finally! You need to arrest him. That dog is vicious. He's been breaking HOA rules for months. I had to protect myself and my children." I stepped out from my porch, Max lying weakly at my feet, his eyes still irritated, but his gaze locked firmly on me, trusting me even in his pain. My voice shook but carried enough strength to silence Karen's rant. "She attacked my service dog. He's federally protected, and I have everything on my security cameras." The officers turned to me, then back to Karen, whose smug expression began to waver for the first time. "Ma'am," one officer said sharply, "did you pepper spray his service dog?" Karen's bravado faltered. "Well, yes, but it was self-defense. That animal is dangerous." The second officer cut her off, his tone cold. "Attacking a service animal is a federal offense. You could face serious charges for this." Karen's face drained of color. For the first time since I'd known her, she had no words. Her phone hung limply in her hand as her eyes darted between me, Max, and the officers. And in that moment, as I stood there trembling with rage and grief, I realized this was only the beginning. Justice was coming. For Max, for me, and for every entitled person who thought they could trample over the law without consequences. Because this wasn't just about HOA drama anymore. This was about federal justice. The flashing red and blue light still reflected off my windows when the officers began their questioning. Max lay on a blanket inside the house, his breathing slow but steady after I had rinsed his eyes again. I kept glancing through the open door to check on him, while one of the officers took my statement. I showed them my service dog documentation, the medical recommendation, and most importantly, the footage from my porch security cameras. The screen clearly showed Karen walking out of her house, pulling a small canister from her pocket and deliberately spraying Max. She wasn't attacked. She wasn't threatened. It was cold, intentional cruelty. The younger officer, Officer Ramirez, shook his head as he watched the video. "This is cut and dry," he muttered. "She had no reason to do this. The dog wasn't aggressive at all." The other officer, Sergeant Miller, turned toward Karen, who still stood frozen on her porch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Ma'am, do you understand the severity of what you've done? This isn't a simple neighborhood dispute. Attacking a service animal is a violation of federal law under the Americans with Disabilities Act. That carries prison time, heavy fines, and a permanent mark on your record," Karen stammered. But he's exaggerating. That dog is huge. It could have attacked me at any moment. I was just protecting myself." Her excuses fell flat. The video showed the truth, and her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. The officers placed Karen in handcuffs. Her shrill protests echoed across the street, but instead of sympathy, curtains twitched as neighbors peeked out from behind. Blinds. I could see it in their faces. They weren't shocked that Karen had gone too far. They were shocked that she was finally facing consequences. "You can't do this to me," Karen shrieked as they guided her toward the squad car. "I'm the HOA vice president. I run this neighborhood. I'll have your badges for this." Sergeant Miller didn't flinch. "Ma'am, you need to stop talking. Anything you say can and will be used against you." The car door slammed, muffling her voice, but I could still see her face pressed against the window, pale and wide-eyed. For the first time since moving here, the street felt quiet, peaceful even. Inside, I sank to the floor beside Max. He rested his head on my lap, his eyes still red but full of that same unshakable loyalty. My hands shook as I stroked his fur. "You're safe, buddy. She's not going to hurt you. Again, I promise." When the officers returned, they explained the next steps. Karen would be booked and charged, and animal control would follow up to ensure Max was recovering properly. The ADA violation would escalate things beyond the local Level federal prosecutors could get involved. This is serious, Officer Ramirez said gently. She's in a lot of trouble, and with the video evidence you have, she doesn't have much of a defense. You did the right thing calling us. For a long time, I had felt powerless against Karen's endless harassment. But tonight, as I looked at Max, my partner, my lifeline, I realized power didn't always come from fighting back with anger. Sometimes it came from letting the truth speak louder than anything else. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and supportive neighbors who stopped by to check on Max. Some brought treats. Others brought meals for me, a quiet acknowledgement of the emotional toll this had taken. What surprised me most was how many whispered confessions I heard. She once threatened to fine me for having my recycling bin visible. She yelled at my kids for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. She told me my Christmas lights weren't HOA approved. Karen's reign of petty terror had stretched far wider than I ever realized, and now, with her arrested, people felt safe enough to speak out. A week later, I attended the HOA board meeting. Karen's seat was empty, and for once the room felt lighter. The president cleared his throat and announced, "As of today, Karen has been permanently removed from the HOA board. We will no longer tolerate behavior that violates the law or the safety of our community." Applause filled the room. Not polite, hesitant applause. Real, heartfelt relief. People were tired of being bullied, and Karen's downfall was more than just justice for me. It was freedom for all of us. When the court date arrived, I sat quietly in the back row, Max lying at my feet. He had healed well, though he still blinked more often than before, a reminder of the pain he had endured. Karen stood at the defendant's table, her posture stiff, her lawyer doing most of the talking. The prosecutor laid out the case with brutal clarity. The video evidence, the service dog certification, the federal protections. Karen's excuses melted under the weight of facts. When the judge delivered the verdict, it was swift and uncompromising. Guilty. She was sentenced to probation, mandatory community service, a fine large enough to cripple her savings, and a permanent mark on her record. More importantly, she was barred from holding any HOA position again. Her face crumpled as the judge said the words, and for a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I looked down at Max, at the gentle eyes that had comforted me through sleepless nights and panic-filled days, and any pity vanished. She hadn't just attacked a dog. She had attacked my lifeline, my family. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked me how I felt. I bent down, resting my hand on Max's head, and answered simply, "Justice isn't just about laws, it's about respect. Max isn't just a service dog, he's my partner, my protector, and my reminder that healing is possible." Karen learned today that no one is above the law, not even an HOA Karen. The cameras flashed, the microphones buzzed, but all I cared about was the steady weight of Max leaning against my leg. That night, back home, I sat on the porch with Max beside me. The neighborhood was quiet, the stars bright above us. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Karen's house sat dark across the street. No porch lights, no screeching voice, no petty notes taped to doors. Just silence. Max shifted, resting his head on my lap, and I smiled. "Looks like we finally won, buddy," I whispered. "And this time, it's not just us. The whole neighborhood's free." Max gave a soft, contented sigh, and in that moment I knew the truth. Karen's cruelty had backfired. What she thought was power had turned into her downfall. And as for me and Max, we weren't just surviving anymore. We were finally living.